Well, good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm Alan, the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast, and the TTT is my way of bringing you a little Middle-earth every single day. Now, if you want longer or deeper content, you're going to want to check out the Prancing Pony podcast for close to 500 hours of free content so far, exploring the Legendarium with years still to go. But it is time to get started with today's Tolkien Tuesday. And for one more week at least, we're going to continue to look at the letters leading up to letter 131. These reveal the efforts that Tolkien was going to in order to get the Silmarillion published alongside The Lord of the Rings. Now, last week, we read some of letter number 124 to Sir Stanley Unwin, in which Tolkien claimed to have produced a monster quite unfit for children, if fit for anybody, and where he says he's willing to let it all be if he cannot have both works published. Well, 10 days later, Unwin replied, still looking to satisfy Tolkien as he suggested splitting the books into 3 or 4, to some extent, self-contained volumes. A few days later, in letter number 125, we read Tolkien's response. With regard to your inquiry about its divisibility, a work of great length can, of course, be divided up artificially into more handy bulks, the sort of process that produced sections of the big Oxford Dictionary labeled onomastical to outing and simple to sleep. I love this. He's comparing breaking up his works to the way a dictionary might have separate volumes sort of randomly in the middle of letters. Tolkien continues, but the whole saga of the 3 jewels and the Rings of Power has only one natural division into 2 parts, each of about 600,000 words, the Silmarillion and other legends, and the Lord of the Rings. The latter is as indivisible and unified as I could make it. I realize the financial difficulties and the remote chance of recovering the great cost. I have no money to sink in the bog, and I can hardly expect you to sink it. Please do not think that I shall feel that I have a just grievance if you decline to become involved without much hesitation. After all, the understanding was that you would welcome a sequel to The Hobbit, and this work cannot be regarded as such in any practical sense, or in the matter of atmosphere, tone, or audience addressed. I'm sorry that I presented such a problem. Willfully, it may seem, since I knew long ago that I was courting trouble and producing the unprintable and unsaleable most likely. I have not at the moment anything else completed to submit, but I am quite prepared to make something simpler and shorter soon. Wow. So first, to the question of splitting things up, that's a hard no from Tolkien. And with that line in the sand drawn, he goes on to give Unwin a really big out opportunity by directly addressing the money aspect of this, and saying that he won't be disappointed if Unwin quickly says no. He even argues that The Lord of the Rings cannot be regarded as a sequel to The Hobbit, not in story, not in tone, not in audience. And finally, he even offers to write another book for Unwin instead, something simpler and shorter. Now, at the same time, he immediately writes to Milton Waldman, not just telling him what Unwin told him, but even spelling out his efforts to convince Unwin to give it up. And check this out from the next letter, letter number 126. I have replied to the effect that I see in his letter his goodwill, but also perceive his opinion that this mass of stuff is not suitable for ordinary publication and requires endowment. I had in my letter made a strong point that the Silmarillion and the Lord of the Rings went together as one long saga of the jewels and the rings, and that I was resolved to treat them as one thing, however they might formally be issued. I noted that the mass naturally divides only between the Silmarillion and the Lord, each about 600,000 words, but that the latter is not divisible except into artificial fragments. I added that I shall not be surprised if he declines to become involved in this monstrous saga, and that now it is off my chest, I'm very willing to turn out something simpler and shorter, and even actually juvenile for him soon. There, at the moment, the matter waits. That's like screenshotting a chat and sending it to somebody else. It's brutal. But there's one more dig at Unwin here. Going back to his letter to Unwin, there'd been a side thread discussion about the lack of success of the recently released Farmer Giles of Ham. In Unwin's reply, he said that Giles had not yet done as well as we'd hoped. And in Tolkien's response, he takes a not-so-subtle dig at their marketing department. He says, I cannot discover that he has been widely heard of. He does not seem to have been very forcibly brought to notice. And he's so pleased with his efforts that he actually relates this to Milton Waldman. Quote, Unwin tells me that Farmer Giles has only sold 2,000 copies. I've replied that I've observed no advertisements. Full stop. Now, if you think that little drama of Tolkien relating his conversations with Sir Stanley Unwin to the competing publisher was interesting, just wait till next week when we find that Sir Stanley ends up passing along Rayner's notes to Tolkien, notes that were most certainly not intended for Tolkien's eyes. For now, though, plan on joining me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for our next Word Nerd Wednesday. Now, please like and subscribe on YouTube, follow or subscribe on your podcast apps to make sure each episode gets downloaded to your device. Follow at Tolkien Times on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And in the words of Faramir, go with the goodwill of all good men.